I'm going to start again, actually. Oh, wow.
Right.
It's the stress. It's the stress of having a visiting group partner. I've never had
Oh,
one. Then
geez.
I'm going to work my way up to group partners, and then I'm going to work my way up to Gary. That's the plan. So you're the first step. Okay, let's do it again. Welcome back to the Lobster Talks podcast by Lobster Capital, where we talk everything entrepreneurship and YC. Today, I'm very excited to have Wayne Crosby from Org, who also was a visiting group partner at Y Combinator. We're going to talk about his journey all the way from entrepreneur to YC, visiting group partner to entrepreneur again. Wayne, thank you so much for being here.
I'm so happy to be here. It's great to be on the show.
Thank you so much. So let's dive in. I've kind of spoiled it a little bit, but tell us a little bit about you and your journey as an entrepreneur and in relationships with YC.
Yeah. So I got started with YC back in 2007. My first company, I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always been a starter. Even when I was working at companies, I was always looking for stuff to get going. And so I was working late night on some side projects with a buddy of mine. And then he was just like, "Hey, I saw this thing on Slashdot. I don't think that's a thing anymore, but like that was where everybody got the tech news back in the day." He's like, this thing called Y Combinator will give you $15,000 for 7% of your company. Isn't that like amazing?
Wow.
And it's hilarious to think about the terms that founders are getting these days. But we went ahead and gave it a whirl. We put together an application. Flew out to Boston for an interview, and it's crazy. I'll just share like a little personal side of the story as we kind of get started here, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs and founders they struggle with the kind of the separation between personal and work and whatnot. The night that we submitted our application to Y Combinator, my wife and I actually found out that we were pregnant with our first kid, which was
wow.
it was like super nerve wracking. And I called up my co-founder and I said, I understand if you don't want to do this, if this isn't the right time, because I'm about to have a kid in several months. And he's like, "Nope, I guess we're gonna have to be one of those forward-looking companies that actually has good paternity leave and takes care of families and whatnot." And he's like, "I'm aligned with that. Let's make it happen." So that's when I knew I had the right founder. Supporting you no matter kind of whether it's
And so
business.
he or she is now 17 and a half, if I'm counting correctly, right?
That's right. That's right. So I've got a son that's now applying to college, and it's nuts.
Wow.
It's been quite the journey. So you can absolutely do the founder thing as a family, but you need some support, obviously, from your family and your partner and whatnot. And my wife was amazing through this whole thing. She's been just like nothing but supportive. And so she was like, "You've always wanted to do a company, so it's only going to get harder after the baby comes. So let's just do it." I was like, "Well, first we got to get into Y Combinator," and we did, and we ended up, they accepted us. That company ended up. It was online collaborative presentations. It was at the time that like Zoom, and not Zoom, like WebEx was kind of still kind of the hot item. And so we thought that one, collaboration online, everything was moving online. So collaboration plus being able to like share presentations through a browser made obvious sense. So we built that, and Google came knocking pretty quickly. They acquired it, and that became Google Slides. And I was at G Suite for many, many years, helping kind of build it from inception to, what it is right now. It's been crazy to see the growth. To think that when we started, everybody was kind of laughing and being like, "Oh, PowerPoint's good enough." And the latest stats I saw that G Suite has now like an 11 times bigger footprint than Microsoft, which is just like mind blowing. So super fun. Did that. I stayed at Google for a decade. Did lots of really cool stuff around AI and social and productivity, and then ended up going and doing a second startup with the CHRO of Google. His name is Laszlo Bock. He's pretty well known in terms of like how do you use data to drive workplace culture. So did that for a long time, and that was fun with the intersection of behavioral science and computer science and machine learning. And that company exited in 2023, and that's when Y Combinator got in touch with them, and they were like, "You should just come be a group visiting partner and give back to the next generation of founders, help them." And I love coaching and mentoring, so jumped on that and did that for a year. And in parallel, what happened was, I had a bunch of tooling that I had built at Humu that was inspired by some of the stuff that I had used at Google. And a bunch of my employees, after the acquisition, they reached back out and said, "Hey, can I use those tools? And if you build me a generalized version of them for my new company, I'll bring them here." And so I just started helping out some friends and building. And turns out like people want these things. So I've been building Org for about a year, and then full time started in July to really double down. And I did the summer 24 batch as part of the Org journey, which was fun to go from founder to group partner, visiting group partner, back to founder again, and kind of go along that journey.
Yeah, went full circle. Congratulations. That's absolutely amazing. So many questions I want to ask you about Batch in 2007, but just because we were ending here on Org, could you kind of walk us through basically? I mean, I've used the tool, I've tried it, but I'm sure many people still don't know about it. In 10 years, it's going to be as big as Google Slides, hopefully. But for those who still don't know, tell us a little bit about Org, please.
Yeah, so Org is a suite of tools that are designed around helping organizations just operate better on the day-to-day. And it's kind of the bridge between HR and productivity, and like what does it take in order to just like have a functional organization. So I've always been fascinated in this space of work and how people work. And when I was part of one of the early AI teams at Google back in 2014, even before any of this, the transformers and stuff started to take over the world. And it was even clear back then that AI was going to destroy a lot of jobs. And so I went on this kind of soul searching mission of like, do I want to actually be a part of the research that's kind of fueling this and pushing it forward?
Wow.
And the conclusion I came to was that I actually think that work is fundamentally human. I think that we as people like to come together. We like to build things that are bigger than what we could build by ourselves. We've done this throughout our entire evolution. And new technology isn't going to change that. Abundance isn't going to change that. So if that's the case, and if we're always going to come together and build things, then let's just like make that experience as delightful and amazing as possible, right? And so I think software has a role to play in that. Which is why I've always kind of been attracted to this like productivity space, the team space. How do we help influence workplace culture and whatnot? And so Org continues that journey, and we're just building a bunch of these tools that I've used in order to run and manage teams. All the way from kind of inception of a company all the way up to 100,000 person companies at Google. So taking these and helping bring it to the masses, and it's just an obvious kind of productivity suite to layer on top of G Suite. If you're using G Suite today, you should also use Org. I'll just give a quick plug there.
You should do that. It's org.us. Okay, go use it.
We got the .com, so it's org.com as well. So
you do. Oh,
that was kind of a really fun journey. Okay. Turns out the person who owned org.com lives in San Francisco, so I met up with him for coffee one day, and he liked what we were doing, sold us the domain, and then turned around and invested in us. So it's pretty fun journey.
So your YC page is not up to date. I was on the YC page and it still says .us, but .com is much, much, much better. So it's org.com. We just did the huge plug. Go sign up. And you said it's for every company, right? From getting started to whatever size.
That's right. It really doesn't matter. There's maybe not all of the applications in there are applicable. Like, for example, we've got an all hands Q&A type of product. If you're a 10-person company, you probably don't need that. If you're a 50-person company, you probably do, right? So somewhere in there, the tools start to become, accessible, but there's something in there for everybody that you can use, whether you're just one person or all the way up to, thousands of people.
That's awesome. And yeah, I'm on the pricing page. I won't disclose because when you do it on the podcast and then a year from now it changes and people are mad at you like, oh, I heard on the pod it was that much dollars. But anyway, it's very affordable is what I'm going to say.
If anybody finds this and wants to become a member or a user of Org, tell me that you found me through this podcast and I will give you a discount. So
that's really cool.
Just email me directly, Wayne@org.com, and we'll work something out.
And make sure you do mention, because then Wayne is going to be so happy with me for bringing him so many customers. He's gonna buy me a beer. So this is perfect. This is set. Okay. So I mean, amazing that you're building. Or again, a very interesting. Google Slides is used by a gazillion number of people. YC always
platform last I saw.
Yeah, exactly. So YC always talks about. I think it's David Lieb, who's the sort of the creator of Google Photos, used by over 1 billion people. It's a shame you're not yet a full-time partner at YC. Maybe you will be at some point. But you're also you built a product that's used by so many people, and that's the same thing here. Or every company in the world could be a user. So in terms of what we call TAM, of the market size, I'm not sure we could do anything bigger. So that's really, really cool. Okay. So many questions I have to ask you. I have to be very picky here, but I do want to ask you about, so I believe you were winter 2007. So that was the 4th batch. There was one in 2005, 2 in 2006, and you were batch number 4. What was it like? There's at the time, YC was this obscure thing that no one knew. You had direct access to PG and Jessica. So kind of tell us how it was. I think you mentioned it was still in Boston at the time. That's crazy. I thought they were already in Silicon Valley.
So they were splitting their time. One batch was in Boston, and then they would do one. The summer batch was in Mountain View, and the winter batch was in Boston at that time.
That's the wrong way to do it, because Boston anyway.
I agree. And it was super tiny. I think there were only about 15 companies in our batch.
Wow.
And just some amazing folks. Out of that batch, there's just there's a ton of group partners at Y Combinator today running the show. With Michael Seibel was in there. Let's see, Dave Rosenko, who was doing Weebly, is now like a kind of big time investor in climate. David Rosenko, yeah. Let's see, Robbie Walker, who was my co-founder, is now like running big chunks of Apple AI and Siri. There's Gustav, who's a group partner over at Y Combinator. Harj is also a group partner over at Y Combinator. Yeah. Right, so like it was just
everyone was there. Yeah,
amazing group of people who came together and just like to build, and it was people who were attracted to it because they just wanted to build, and they wanted to surround themselves with like-minded folks that were kind of building in that day and age. And of course, we all we were drawn to the entrepreneurship and trying to build something big, but really the value that came out of that was the connection and the network. And I think that was the big insight from those early Y Combinator classes, was that the community is really the value that happens. And so that group of people, that cohort, we've stayed together over the years and still get together periodically. And it was an amazing transformational kind of 3 months back in 2007 for sure.
For sure. And, you said transformational 3 months, but actually the relationships, you carry them for decades and decades onward. And that's also transformative, right. I'm sure. You said sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that's exactly right. Like it all started there, right? And pretty much every major life event, except for my kids, they were even involved in kind of the story, but has involved YC in some way, right? Where we've engaged and had great conversations, and they've kind of moved and helped me think about different things in different ways in order to move things forward. So it's just been amazing group of people.
Impressive. Yeah, very, very impressive. I mean, I agree. It is an amazing group of people. I don't know most of them as good as you, not yet, but it's the same thing that in 20 years from now, the people that I see now who are going through YC, I'm much more closer to them, even though it's bigger cohorts, or getting involved, other investors who invest in YC like myself, etc. So 20 years from now, I know some of those people will have amazing trajectories and lift everyone up with them, with their knowledge and what they learn along the way. You are for sure a born entrepreneur. You've built several businesses. However, you got acquired. I don't know. Your LinkedIn says after 6 months. Is that even?
It was a little bit longer than that, but it was pretty close. Yeah, it was very quick.
Crazy.
We didn't parallel first year taxes, right? Like it was one of those.
That's insane. That's how good it was. That's insane. So congrats. But then you stayed at Google for 10 years. How? what made you stay? Because usually those born entrepreneurs like you, and you are for sure, they have that itch to scratch, and they're leaving after 2-3 years to just start again something new. However, you stayed. Tell us why and what happened.
I mean, if you rewind the clock to Google of 2007, it was a great place to be. It was exciting. It was growing like crazy. It was just the energy in the people that were attracted to working there. It was just nothing like I've ever seen. And so part of it was just being around amazing people and growth. The other part was that, right as I was starting to contemplate taking off and doing my next startup, we expected our second kid.
I was going to say.
And so, well,
Congrats. Yeah.
thank you. So it was a conversation about like, okay, do we want to do that again? First one went great. But maybe like, let's just hold off for a little bit longer. And I was enjoying my time there at Google. So, I thought they were doing an amazing job of continuing to grow. And, the mantra of, don't be evil was still a thing. And then eventually at some point I got to the point where I had I kind of moved into, different areas of search and research and other places, and I'd seen different parts of the company, and I realized that the skill that I was gaining was really just being able to help my team navigate bureaucracy, and that's where I think as a founder, you go, oh, this is not the skill I want to actually have. This is not the value I want to bring to the world. Mm-hmm. And it is super valuable for people who are drawn to that problem. Great, more power to you. But as a founder and as an entrepreneur, it's not about how do you navigate that bureaucracy. It's more about what can I build and bring to the world that actually changes lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm sort of trying to understand what drove you, in your journey, because it is a very unique one. And at some point, after starting your second company and selling it, then you become a visiting group partner at YC. And I have to confess to you, I've already confessed it to a few. I think I've talked to Nicolas about it, Nicolas Dessein and Jared Friedman. I think YC group partner is probably my dream job. It's probably, I think it's one of the best thing you can do in the world. It's got to be so interesting. It's super diversified. It's extremely rewarding because you see some companies, be amazing successes. I think it's my dream job. So, but I'm not a YC alum, by the way. So I think it's quite unlikely that I'll end up there. If Gary, you want to call me, I'll come. But all joking aside, it is, for me anyway, it is my dream job. Yet, and many end up staying for years and years and decades. They seem to agree. And I'm sure you're not going to say, oh, it was horrible, that's why I left. So I want to understand, why did you leave? Was it that itch of entrepreneurship, or how could you leave when it's such a good job?
It's a good question. And I think it's a common pattern that successful entrepreneurs, they turn around, they either do some angel investing or they start their own fund or they go, work at a VC. It happens a lot. And I'd done some angel investing over the years, and I really enjoy working with founders and so I was like, yeah, let's try the investing side of the world, and I can come at it, and I think I have something to offer founders. And I really did enjoy it. For the first batch that I did, it was amazing. It was like high energy. The founders are fantastic. The talent density is just off the charts, and I'm drawn to that. I think that's great. And then the second batch started, and I was like, oh, wait, we just rewound the clock 6 months. And I'm doing the same thing again, right? And so I think one of the questions that I always ask myself is like, where can I have the biggest impact in the world, and what can I do? And I do think like part of this is helping founders and move them along, but on a slightly different cadence than like trying to do it every 6 months as like a program like Y Combinator does. And I think it's an exceptionally valuable program. I'm so happy that they do it. It was just like, I couldn't see myself doing it 5 years from now, every 6 months, finding another group of founders. Kind of
every 3 months now. It's even worse.
Every 3 months, right? And honestly, like I did a bunch of soul searching again. At all of these kind of big decision points, you kind of reflect back on like, why is it that you get up in the morning? And at my core, I'm a builder. I stay up late hacking on code. I wake up early, excited to tackle the next problem. And so everybody has a role to play in this ecosystem. And I think it's important to be true to yourself in terms of like, what are you actually drawn to, and what do you don't just be just because like maybe investor feels like it's the position of most interest because you get to see lots of different companies and you get to help decide what is the future, and you feel like you're making the future, and that's absolutely true. But on the flip side, I just like being hands on. I just like building. And so when it comes down to it, if I have to choose between being an investor at the end of the day or being a builder, at this moment in my life, I'm excited to be a builder. Not to say that'll always be true, because everybody always kind of wants to change and evolve and kind of move in different directions. But I absolutely love it, and I think I've always been. When you started Y Combinator and you kind of like introducing yourself to all of the founders, you got kind of give this welcome pitch. And I introduced myself as a platypus. I'm like, I'm an individual contributor. I'm an executive. I invest. I'm a founder. I do all these things. Like I write some code. I like do the taxes. At any moment in time, you kind of have to put on a different hat, try some different things as a founder, kind of grow into the different roles. And so for that, like you get a chance to see what you're actually drawn to. And honestly, I just love writing code and building. So that's where I'm at right now.
That's awesome. So you truly are a real founder. It is a great job, but it's not a great job for everybody. It depends on what you really want
That's right.
and
Right.
need. Yeah.
I
Awesome.
think
No, that's great. Yeah.
that's super important to understand, right? Like this is the thing that like I try and stress so much in people when they're like either trying to decide about work or career or start a company. It's like you really have to look within yourself and be like, okay, what is it that drives me? Like if you find that thing and you do that, if it's whether it's being an investor or a founder or an employee at a startup or whatever it is, like if you actually do like own that and believe it, great things happen. Like you feel so great every day when you wake up and you're like ready to go tackle the world, and you have more energy than you know what to do with, right? So people always just feel kind of bogged down when they're kind of forced to do the things that they're not excited about, And I'm in the fortunate enough position that it's like, it's shades of gray in terms of what I'm excited about that I have the opportunity to work on. But I think that it's just like really important for everybody to just find that inner enjoyment.
So I wanted to ask you about secrets of YC. You've been really behind the curtain. Now I have you here live on the podcast. Can you share one secret from YC that no one knows about?
The maybe this isn't true from the outside, but from inside and like watching it, the thing that I took away from being a visiting group partner is that YC is like incredibly transparent. Incredibly, they like they share all of the things that you need to do in order to be successful in your entrepreneurial journey. And so we would get founders that would show up in office hours and ask these questions, and all of this information is YC has put out there,
Available.
or they have they've got internal resources or whatnot. So the thing that I think is most surprising is that there really isn't much secret sauce. There's obviously experience from the founders, there's from the group partners that and they're able to like customize it for your particular needs. But I'd say like over 90% of the feedback that we give in group office hours ends up being like there is this knowledge, it does exist in the world. And so
Pretty cool.
I think that the thing to realize is if you're a founder, I get a lot of people who are like, oh, YC, I want to get into YC. It's the thing that like is going to make my company successful. And it's like, actually, that's probably not the thing that's going to make your it helps. It gives you visibility. It gives you like this incredible 3-month concentration. It gives you some network. But the reality is that the things that you need to do in order to be successful, all that information is out there, and then it's just grit and hard work and following the process of how do you actually build a company.
That's pretty cool. I think if I had to sum it up, it's like the secret is there's no secret. Everybody thinks there's a secret, but like, and it's true. I've noticed it. YC shares so much content. The YouTube channel, there's like 5 new videos every week, and you're like, where do they find the time? And then you have the startup school that's free and open, and I mean, there's so much information out there. Okay, really cool. The secret is that there's no secret. You mentioned being working on AI at Google in 2014. And you
Yeah.
actually said, I realized already at the time that AI was going to replace a lot of jobs, which is like very, yes, Google was probably the best place at the time on AI, the most advanced. So you saw, but still, AI was in its infancy at the time. It was ridiculous compared to what we're accustomed to now. So I don't know. What can you share about what happened there at the time? What were you actually working on? What made you feel or realize that it was going to replace jobs? Just what was it like then?
Yeah, what drew me to it was so there's this amazing computer scientist at Google. His name is Jeff Dean. Anybody who's worked at Google and kind of knows the lore of him, he's phenomenal. He gave this talk once called the Cat Detector, and it was some of his earliest work on what was Google Brain at the time. And he built this unsupervised neural net that looked at a bunch of YouTube videos, and the punchline of the whole talk is that he like built the world's most expensive cat detector. He could tell you whether or not there was a cat in a video. It's like the Silicon Valley hot dog, no hot dog,
Yeah.
right? And I saw that and I was like, holy cow, this is the future. Like if we
Mm.
can start to understand the context that somebody is trying to interact with different experiences on, through technology, and we're able to predict like what they're actually trying to do, then we can just build incredible products. And I've always been kind of more of a product guy than a research person. But at that time, AI was still very much in the research realm. And so I went to the head of the team over there for the machine intelligence team. Um, his name is JG. He's actually, again, he's one of the people who's over at Apple leading. He reports to Tim Cook and manages all of Apple AI now. But he
Wow.
saw it too. He was also part of the knowledge graph team way back when.
Wow.
Um, and so he's been working in the space for a super long time. And I went to him and I said, hey JG, I never done anything in the space. I took one AI class that in college, and I wrote some code in Lisp, right? Like, um, but this is a fascinating space, and I think this is the future. Is there a space for me on your team? And I was like
Wow.
a Google director at the time, right? I had a huge team, um, and I'm like, I just want to be an individual contributor over here again, and like figure out how I can help, because this is like clearly the future to me. And so, to
Very
his
cool.
credit, he was like, "Hey, we're all just figuring this stuff out. Nobody really knows what's going on here. Like from a like, how is this actually going to evolve? And we're
Yeah.
going to need all sorts of skill sets." So he's like, "Come on board." And the thing I did was uh, try and take a lot of that research and bring it into the application experiences that you see in Google. So at the time when you were doing image search, it would be like, you'd search for red cars, and it would use the alt text of the image to find, like
Huh.
red cars or
Yeah.
the text around the image, right?
Yeah.
So now it's actually using computer vision, right? And so we were doing some of the early stuff. We were doing some of the things around YouTube classification, and we were doing some things around, the productivity suite, and being able to, the early Gmail stuff around being able to predict what you would respond with and what. And so it was a lot of that work of how do we take this really amazing research and then try and apply it into real world applications that people are using every day. Because if it just stays in research land, like that doesn't excite me. You got to actually be able to use it every day.
Oh, wow.
So
Very cool.
that's how that came to be. And I did that for many years, and I loved it. It was super cool. And like I mentioned, it was clear from early on that this technology, we were at this inflection point, and it was just going to go like crazy. Um, so it was always, AI was always 10 years out forever for the last 50 years
Mm.
or
Yeah.
60, whatever it was. But it was clear that it was going to happen. And then when I saw the open AI, I went to, they invited a few people in, to kind of show off some of their early chat GPT stuff. Um, and I saw it and I was like, oh my God, it's here. It's amazing. Like, it's just like, for the first time ever, you're passing the Turing test, and it's just like, mind blowing.
Finally, yeah.
Finally, right? Like it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible, and it's just hockey stick, right? From here, it's just everything is just going like gangbusters, and uh, we're going to see incredible growth. It feels a lot like the early days of the web, like when I
Yeah.
did my first startup, and you had all these desktop applications, and everything was moving online and Web 2.0, and there was just this like gold rush of like didn't matter what you were working on, just like grab a shovel and start digging. Like there's gold to be found. Go do it. And it feels very, very similar to that kind of day and age of just like there's so many new problems that could be solved in
Yeah.
interesting ways with this technology. Like to start working on it, you will find something interesting.
Yeah. I want to double click on that. It seems so you've been, again, stating that you've been working on AI since 2014. So it's more than 10 years ago now, and you saw it coming and you actually worked in making it happen and making it become a reality. And then it seems, maybe it's just an appearances, you're going to tell me, that you chose to start a new startup in 24, but it's not an AI project. Is that only, or doesn't seem to be an AI startup? Is it just behind bars, behind closed doors? Actually, it is, or why did
We,
you choose to do that?
that's a astute point. So a lot of the stuff that there's a couple of things on how I think about AI. I think that there is absolutely a space for a universal interface that is like feels very uh, akin to the stuff, the things that are happening in like with OpenAI and ChatGPT and whatnot. Um, uh, but I'm not, as a startup, it's like very difficult to compete at that level, and so by what I'm drawn to is I actually think that like people still at this moment in time want um, more structured applications. They're drawn to them. They like, I want the thing that helps me get this specific task done. Over
Mhm.
time, we're going to be more and more generalized. And we have a bunch of features in Org that are going to launch soon. They're like launching to some internal or some private customers right now, that are pretty compelling and they use a bunch of AI as well in order
Okay.
to create the experiences. And so my attitude on AI is a little bit different, and it's not like model building, and it's not because I'm coming at it from the application side. It's like, let's use AI in the appropriate ways that are going to really create delightful experiences and predictive experiences. Um, in a more structured space, as opposed to just kind of a free for all. So you'll see a bunch of AI stuff as we continue to launch. It'll be incorporated. It's more um, AI in the purpose of like helping make experiences great, as opposed to kind of the foundational model or
Yeah.
the generalized interface type of experience.
And also, you didn't benefit from being, tagged AI to sort of attract investors, but you really didn't need that with your background and your experience. I think I'm pretty sure investors really were drawn to you, whatever you were building, very, very easily. So you didn't need to benefit from that. But it's interesting. You sort of pretend you're just a regular SaaS company, and of course, you're going to use AI like many people do. It might actually help you get in the door with some customers who don't like AI. There's still a lot of people today who thinks it's a hype, or it's a fad, which it's really not. But if they're not convinced, you're like, oh, we're just a SaaS to help your productivity, and then actually you're gonna, so it's sell people what they want and deliver them what they need. Yeah,
That's right. And it's super important. This is one of the lessons that I've learned over the years of being an entrepreneur. It's super important to meet the users where they're at right now.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Yeah,
Everybody's excited about AI. Everybody's excited about the things that it can do. Um, I think that it's going to take a while for it to materialize into, of course, billion-dollar companies. Like that's already happening. But like, I like large companies are going to come out of this wave of technology. And they're going to change the way that people, experience applications and technology. Um, but people also have real world problems today, and they know the tools that they like to solve them today. And
yeah.
if you deviate too much from that, it becomes very difficult in the sales process. So it's nice to kind of meet people where they are, and then know what the future can do, and kind of bring them along in that journey. As a that tends to be more my product. Or one of the big lessons that I've learned about product development. When I was doing Humu, it was a little bit too far out in the future in terms of being able to, so there's this really interesting thing that happens when you're doing product development, AI product development. Uh, a reasonable thesis, and this was mine when I started Humu, was that the ideal product is one that shows up when it needs to and basically is invisible when it's not needed. And
Yeah.
as a user, you're like, that sounds great. As a business, it turns out like becomes really hard in the sales process because
Mm.
and especially if you're doing something as lightweight as like behavioral change, which can have a real impact in workplace cultures and whatnot. Um, but I'll give you a concrete example. So we might detect that a team is like working really hard and they're stressed, but they're contributing a bunch of work. So we might nudge the manager to say something like, "Hey, it looks like your team is working really hard. Why don't you like express some gratitude to them in your next
Oh.
team meeting?" Right? Seems like an obvious thing to do. We can actually measure the impact of like, do people take this action? Does it actually help like the team stay motivated and kind of move forward? Um, but if you ask that manager, like, did that did Humu help you and drive you forward? They're like, yeah, I was going to do that anyway. Right. And it's because we as humans also like to think of ourselves in the best way possible. And it's like, yes, but let me show you the data in aggregate that tells you that like maybe you individually would have because you're an amazing person, but in aggregate, people do not do this. Right. And so being able to create a product experience that people innately derive value from, and they understand exactly the problem that they're solving with it, has huge value to businesses. So it may not be the sexiest or most innovative thing, but it actually really helps push the business forward from a commercial perspective.
It's like selling insurance. It's difficult to sell because you don't see that
Right.
it seems like you don't need it. You just don't see it. And it's only if and when you use it that you're glad that you bought it. But at the time when you buy it, you don't see necessarily the value.
That's right.
That's very interesting. Okay, we're towards the end of our time together. I still have many questions, but I'll choose just one last before we move to. And then I'll ask just a few easy questions. But I was mentioning you've had, I'm sure, a lot of interest from investors. You've sold your first two businesses, but I'm guessing you probably also had your choice to pick a potential co-founder, and I believe you didn't. I'd love to hear. I'm guessing it's a choice on your end. You're like, this time I'm going to do it on my own. Previously, you built with others. Or maybe it isn't. So I just wanted to ask you. Maybe it's not the right timing. You didn't find the right person, or was it a choice? If it's not, maybe we can just move on.
It's a little, it's more about just like the origin of like how this came to be, right? I was just building and hacking for some friends. I wasn't intending for it to turn into a business
Mm,
until it like
yeah.
became obvious that there was this void here that like the market was excited to have filled. Um, and then when it was obvious, I was like, okay, cool. Let me go talk to a few people that I would be excited to be
Yeah.
co-founders with, and um, the timing wasn't right for them. And
Mm,
I kind of, having been through this a few times, I know the journey in terms of what needs to
yeah.
happen and kind of the cadence in terms of which things happen. And it just got to the point where it became a little too hard to bring on a co-founder that made any sense. I do work with an amazing friend of mine. He came on board a little bit later, and he's fantastic. So he's got a big chunk of the company, but
Okay. Yeah.
he's not a co-founder per se. But it's a fabulous working relationship, and I think it's important that you work with people. To my point about like that human element that drives us to work and collaborate. But it's not the same thing. It was a timing thing more than anything else. I would have loved to have had a co-founder.
Mm,
The other thing that we've done that's like very different, and like this is something that I'm really proud about how this has come together, which is that um, again the origin story of some people wanted some of these things, and I was like, cool. The first person who asked for one of these was actually a designer, and she was like, I really I would love this internal tool, and I was like, well, that's great. Can you like give me some designs and I'll build it for you, and we can polish it. And if it turns out that people actually want to buy it, we'll do some sort of rev share, and I'll get back to you. And what this has actually turned into is a really innovative way of working. So we have something that's in between like open source and gig economy,
Hmm.
where um, we have contributors that come onto the platform, and they write some software, or they do some marketing campaigns, or they do some design, whatever skill set that they're that they have
Oh,
a
that's
craft in.
cool. Hmm.
They come in and they get contribution credit, and then the idea is that kind of annually we'll pay out a bonus based off of business performance, and if you've contributed, you get a little chunk of that bonus, right? So
Oh, wow.
we have about 25 contributors now that have come on, and these are like world class people. Like one of them was a co-creator of React. One of them,
Oh, wow.
was my number one salesperson at Humu. That's would regularly sell $1 million deals. Like there's really cool people who just kind of fuels this thesis of they just like to work on cool things with cool people, right?
Hmm.
And so if you're able to create that space that allows for creativity and autonomy, you can get some really great help. So anyway, I'm not building alone, and even if I don't have a co-founder, it's a little bit of a unique structure. But this also allows the business to have a lot of flexibility in terms of, I don't need a full-time designer, but I've got
Yeah.
3 world-class designers that are in my
Hmm.
contributor pool that I can
Even
tap
better.
and
Hmm.
ask, right? And say like, hey, I could use some help this week, right? So it's fantastic. It's really working for us at this stage. We'll see how long it scales. I think it works, or if it scales or whatnot.
Yeah.
But for now, it's good.
It is interesting. I want to sort of conclude that by saying I've seen it before as well. It's very often a timing issue. It's basically like relationships.
Yep.
uh, uh, it's all about timing. And so for most people, you're obviously a rare breed of very successful founder. But for most people, I would say don't go at it alone. It's actually very much harder to get into YC on your own, though not impossible, even for first time founders. But it is very difficult, and it is like a marriage where you're going to be together for hopefully 10 years. So
Yeah.
I
I
but thank you for sharing so openly about what happened. Yeah,
If I had not done it twice before, I wouldn't be doing it alone, right? I would wait until I
exactly.
actually find that co-founder that makes it work. It is
Exactly.
just too hard of a journey to go it alone, until you've actually until you have really internalized what being a founder actually is, and what it takes. And it took me 15 years to get there. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't
uh,
start there.
yeah, thank you so much for being here and being so generous with your time. I had a blast. Where can people find you if oh actually okay, so where can I forgot a question, so let's go with that. Where can people find you if they want to be in touch? What's the best way to follow you or reach you?
Yeah, so I am pretty active on LinkedIn. I don't post a lot, but I do engage with people who send me comments and messages and whatnot. Um, we've got an org community Slack channel that people participate in, that are either using the product or want help with just how to think about organizational structures, and like how to actually run companies and whatnot. You can find me there. You can hit me up directly, just wayne@org.com. And I'm happy to help. I'm pretty generous with my time, and I love giving back. So if I can help, I will. And if I can't, then it's always great to meet good people.
That's the YC spirit. I love it. Yeah, last question very quickly. Could you recommend a book that had a huge influence in your life?
Oh my God. So I have a confession. I'm not like a huge reader,
That's okay.
which
Many
is
people
which is
confess this to me.
kind of counter to a lot of what you hear from like successful, like here's how to become successful. Read all these books, right? I'm much more of a doer, but I will say like, so this is going way back to like early 2000s, um, where I grew up. I didn't go to a prestigious school. I went to Arizona State University. I went to community college for 2 years before that, right? Like I grew up in Arizona, where there wasn't like this entrepreneurial kind of fuel that Silicon Valley has, um, and yet I still found my way here, right? And so I think one of the things that I actually one of the books that actually helped get me here, which is just like somewhat outdated at this point, but was Rich Dad Poor Dad, right?
Oh yeah.
And it was just like this really interesting story about like, if you want to build wealth, you basically have to become an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
And like, it was the first time that I realized that software was this incredible mechanism. We were at this like point in time where software, every business before had to basically warehouse and inventory and everything else. And for the first time ever, the internet, allowed you to not have to worry about any inventory. You had unlimited inventory and you didn't have to pay for any warehousing. And so, you basically watched the cost. You're like, your number one and two costs in running a business are, in the past were your people and your inventory and warehousing, right?
Goes
And
to
so
zero.
that goes to zero. So
Yeah.
now all you have are your people cost. So this brings me back to my point of where we're at today, which is with all of this AI stuff, you're going to watch those people costs basically go to zero. And so
Wow.
now your two biggest costs of running a business have basically just been completely wiped out. You're going to see so much value created. Like, here's my prediction. You're going to have significant numbers of billion-dollar companies with less than 100 employees over the next
for
decade.
sure.
Like,
For
this
sure.
is a no-brainer, right? And it's because of exactly these two things. Your cost of warehousing and inventory went to zero, your cost of people went to zero. And so now you can just create essentially infinite value with like nominal cost.
That's really cool. Okay, that's a perfect note to end on. Wayne, thank you so much for being here and being so generous with your time. I had a blast. Thank you so much. And to our listeners still here, if you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. If you're on a podcast app, leave us a 5-star review. That really helps. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on the Lobster Talk.